That's right. Well, thanks very much, Major. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Our guest right now is the dapper Major General Dan Hahn. Have I pronounced everything right, Dan?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I said it once before, and I'll repeat this, that this is the closest I've ever been to a Major General.
Yeah, I have a lot of people tell me that. But,
is that right?
You know, I always reminded myself that no matter how high in rank you get, you still put your pants on the same way, one leg at a time. And so, in that regard, we're not any different than anybody else.
Oh, yeah?
Well, you know, I mean, we have some advantages, but the bottom line is that, you know, when it comes to leadership or, you know, what we were just talking about before we started here, organizations, you know, it's all a matter of the energy you put into it. And if you don't do that properly as a leader, then it still isn't going to happen. So in the end, I always believe that leadership is the key to any successful organization, any successful endeavor. And whether you're a young sergeant or a major general or a four-star general, if you don't have the right leadership skills, it's not going to happen right.
Well said. Now, can you give us a rundown on your military career? That's interesting.
Yeah, I 36 years until I retired, and then I started out as an artillery officer. I commanded at every level you can do as a field artillery officer, to include Corps Artillery Commander. I was a battalion commander during Desert Storm, and that was an exciting experience. During the Kosovo campaign, I was the Corps Artillery Commander, but I was also in charge of the Corps Targeting Cell. And so we ended up down in Albania. And I learned a lot about targeting and everything, which was important later in my life when I was later a Chief of Staff during the Iraq War. And so that was an interesting 4-month period of time down in Albania. And the mud when we arrived there was knee-deep, and I guess that's where, again, I appreciated soldiers. I couldn't believe how they got that camp up and maintained their morale, even though they were knee-deep in mud. And I watched them as the rain's coming down and they're falling in the mud, and they come up with a smile on their face. So it's amazing. They don't understand that often, but that kind of attitude is what oftentimes keeps the leaders going.
You just gave me some deja vu back on Tinian Island in World War II. But how many deployments did you have? How many wars were you in?
Well, I went to Desert Storm, which was, you know, for about a 5 or 6 month period before we came back. I was down in Albania. We didn't call that a war. It was the Kosovo campaign. I got the NATO campaign medal, but it was not ever considered a combat zone. But in terms of difficulty, it was as difficult as any other combat operation I was in. And then twice into Iraq, I spent as a general officer. I was Chief of Staff of the 5th Corps when the 5th Corps led the charge, and eventually was in charge of all of the ground troops in Iraq. That was in 2003. And then in 2006, I was the Deputy Corps Commander and was the Deputy Multinational Corps Iraq Commander. So those were basically 2 one-year tours in combat. And then my last tour was in a NATO assignment in the Netherlands, in which I was in charge of operations in a headquarters that was responsible for NATO operations. Now, NATO was never really designed to do operations. They never had to do it during the Cold War, and so they were still learning. So that was a real challenge. And then whenever you have 26 nations together all trying to speak English, it is a tremendous communications challenge. And so it was a great experience, and I was in and out of Afghanistan, and I'm very familiar with the challenges that we have in Afghanistan. Overall, I had 6 tours in Europe, 5 in Germany, 1 in the Netherlands, and then I had another tour in Korea early on in my career, and then I went to all the schools you're supposed to. I got a master's in military arts and science from the School of Advanced Military Studies. I taught 3 years of ROTC, a couple of tours in the Pentagon, places like Fort Stewart and Fort Sill and Fort Lewis, and a few other places that I haven't mentioned. But great opportunity, and throughout, the reason I stayed is because I always got great jobs, but most importantly, I had a great respect for the soldiers and the troops that I led, and my peers and the people that I associated with, and my superiors. And that was the true thing that kept me moving in the military.
Could you have stayed in longer?
No, I was pretty much at the end of my time. I didn't get selected for 3-star general, so it is an up or out policy, and there's only, I don't know, 14, I think, that get selected to 3-star. So it's a pretty tight select group. So, I guess on the one hand you say, well, you failed to make 3-star general, but everybody except, well, actually everybody eventually doesn't get promoted, because once you get to 4-star, that's it. And so there's only one chief of staff of the Army and only one chairman of the Joint Chiefs, so it's it's pretty tight at the top. And a lot of people talk about a lack of great leaders in our military among the General Officer Corps, and I don't really believe that. We have some really great leaders right now, and times are different than World War II, but I believe that our 4-star generals are every bit as capable as the ones we had during World War II.
Now, you're an academy graduate, too.
I am. I graduated in 1973 from West Point, and that probably opened the doors for everything I achieved in life, and great opportunity. And I try and get as many qualified young people interested in going to the academies as possible, because I think there's no finer education in America.
It's great. It's just great. I always admire guys that went. In fact, I had qualified when I was based at Hamilton Air Force Base.
Yeah.
I qualified for the academy, and they shipped me overseas. And the next, when I tried to get the transfer and everything, I was shipped overseas real quick.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities that are missed like that, and I won't go into that story. But in many ways, I was lucky to have a congressman who really understood the intricacies of getting people into the academy, and if he hadn't, I wouldn't have made it in there, because there was some problems with the paperwork and everything. And so it is oftentimes luck that gets you to where you're at, and I never forget that either, because there were certainly throughout my career a lot more qualified people than myself who could have been a major general. So I try and keep that in perspective.
What is the most memorable thing that ever happened to you during your career, whatever the rank, all the way up?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one. I would have to say that the opportunity to be selected for battalion command. I mean, there's other commands and there's other assignments and all that, but battalion command is still at the level where you're close enough to the troops, and at the same time you have considerable autonomy, and I think you have the greatest impact on soldiers overall. And you have a sergeant major, and there's of course the first sergeants in the unit, and working with them, and then all your junior officers, you really can make a difference with a relatively large group of people, and it's exciting to be, like the deputy corps commander, and there were 40,000 some troops under me, but it was like just sound bites. I'd go visit them, you'd see them, you hope you were making a difference, but it's you're there for support and everything, but as a battalion commander, you're you're there still with the troops. And so I would have to say that was, a great assignment and great opportunity.
As leadership, where you could do really hands-on leadership, I've often heard that the reason the German army, the Wehrmacht, could not function as well, that the soldiers were too militaristic, the word I'm trying to find is that they did not adapt. They could not adapt in the field as well as Americans could.
Yeah, I don't know. There are some misnomers about the German army of World War II. Mm-hmm. It was actually a very democratic army. But again, the discipline was different. Mm-hmm. And so American soldiers are allowed to use their common sense more than any other soldier, and I say soldiers, but it's all services, than any other force in the world. And, I heard a great comment by, we had captured an after-action report from the Taliban. I know it's hard to believe that the Taliban actually does after-action reports, but they are true professionals in terms of what they do. And so early on when we went into Afghanistan, they said they noticed the difference between us and the Russians was that they had learned to, when they had an attack, to take out the leader. And they said generally when you took out the leader in a Russian unit, regardless of what size, then it became headless, and it was easy to kill them and put them into chaos. In the case of American units, he said if you killed the leader, the next person stepped forward and somebody else took charge. There was always somebody who stepped forward and knew that they had to lead. And I think that is a trait that is uniquely American. Now, that's not to say that that doesn't happen in other armies, but I think it's more routine in the American service.
Does it stem from the freedom that we have in this country from growing up, and you have an opportunity to be most anything?
Well, I think it goes all the way back to the revolution and the way we thought of ourselves. The individual self-worth, we were fighting for something that we believe in, and von Steuben himself, being German, said that the Americans are different. And he said you have to explain to them why they're doing something, and he said then they'll do it. He said discipline is different. He said, and you have to allow them to use their common sense. And so I think there's some basic things, and I still see that with our new troops coming in, and I've read a lot of history, and there's not much difference between an American soldier of today in terms of how he behaves in stressful situations as the way I have read about World War I or World War II or the Civil War even. So I think there's, Americans are different, and I think it's for the situations we find ourselves in combat. I think it is to our advantage because I think it saves lives, and you can just go to the cases in Iraq or Afghanistan where we've had so many soldiers and troops wounded, and yet they haven't died on the battlefield. And the medics just do what they're supposed to do. They've been trained well, but most importantly, they know that they're there to save those lives. There's just no quit in American service people. And so they know they have a mission and they want to get to it. And if you read about World War II, that was the sense of urgency. They wanted to get that war over with. And so it's the American way. And now where we need some patience in places like Afghanistan, maybe sometimes that isn't so good. And we found that patience and understanding of different cultures becomes extremely important. So there are differences in every war.
Yeah. General, with your intelligence, your experience, your education, and you still have a lot to give. And have you thought about politics or university teaching?
I've thought about politics, And one, I'm not sure I'm cut out to be a politician. I want to fix problems. Politicians don't fix problems. They, at the national level, run a constant election cycle. And right now, we're not solving many problems. I think that our country, if we have problems, we got to solve this at the local level. And just as an example, I heard the mayor of Canton talking the other day, and he was talking about how the state balanced its budget on the backs of the communities. And I'm thinking, no, that's okay, because if the community sees things it needs, then they need to vote in the taxes to pay for it. I really believe that self-reliance starts at the local level. So in that regard, I would love to help out in the communities, and I could see, even being a mayor of a small town or a medium-sized town. But in the education side, I would love to get into the academic world and probably teach some history and have an impact on our young people, because I worry about our young people not getting the direction they need in life. But again, there's challenges of that, because in today's world, you've got to be a round peg in a round hole, and so I don't necessarily have either the background or the education credentials that are going to, immediately hire. But I am working on that in terms of some potential to do some adjunct teaching, and I have an offer out there that I may be able to pick up on this fall. And in the meantime, I've got 4 grandchildren, and I'm trying to be the best grandfather that I can. We've got some parents that need some tending to, and so that takes a bit of time. And then I'm involved in the Military Officers Association, which I think is a great organization, and both at the national level and the local chapter. American Legion, I'm trying to support a chapter or a post in that, and then we've also got another club, and I'm involved in the church and all that. So I don't know. I'm staying busy. I don't know if it's as productive as people would think it to be, but in terms of where I'm at, taking care of family and trying to help out in the local area is maybe more important right now than trying to do something at the national level. And I know that's counterintuitive and not necessarily what most people would believe.
Well, we'd like to see you use these talents. Of course, I know you're using them now in the family way and local organizations and all, but my goodness, you've got a wealth of experience, education, and of course you've got the drive.
Well, and I thank you for that. And you're right. And I haven't closed the book on too many things. I've been doing some talking with Rotary clubs and different things, and I'll find something out there. And I've had different offers that have fallen through for one thing or another. But in the end, I can. I also need to do some writing, and I don't know if anybody would read what I write, but it would be.
I'd read it, good. And Ray would read it, right?
I know you would. I know you would.
Yeah, Dan, have you thought possibly about doing some radio work? There's a Colonel Speed Wilson, a retired Marine Colonel fighter pilot, and he did have a talk show on a station in Canton. And then, of course, he's up in his 90s now, and he gave it up a couple years ago. But you could reach a lot of people. You got a lot to give.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned that to me previously, and I don't know. It's not anything that I've thought about. Maybe I'll have to talk to you offline and pick your brain on that. See if there's something out there.
It'd take you about 2 minutes to pick my brain. Dan,
I doubt that.
Major General Dan,
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Good. Well, thank you. And as always, I love talking with you, Ernie.
Now you're being a nice guy now.
Yeah, no, I'm serious about that.
Okay, thanks again.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
a very great program.